Welcome, everyone. We're going to allow a minute or so for the last people to come signing in and for everyone to connect to audio, but want to welcome you all. Great. Again, my name is Katie. We're going to get this PowerPoint up here. Thank you for joining us for our second workshop for this bus routing study. And again, we're just going to allow a minute or so to let everyone sign on. I'll introduce myself. My name is Katie DeMeo. I'm here with AIM Consulting. I'll be helping facilitate here tonight. Again, we're really thankful that you guys are spending a little time with us this evening to discuss the BCAG B-Line bus routing study. As you just heard me say, this is our second workshop. You'll hear a little bit more about that. Katie, if we can get the PowerPoint up. I'm not talking to myself, I promise. Wonderful. And it looks like we still have some people joining. As I said, I just want to welcome you all to the second public workshop for the bus routing study. Before we begin, and as people are signing on, we just want to take a moment to review some of the Zoom instructions. And again, we still have some people signing on, which is great. We have plenty of time here tonight. So I know a lot of you have been in Zoom now for a while, so just a couple of reminders. You've been muted upon entry just to allow limited background noise. We encourage you to put any questions throughout the presentation through our comment box. We are recording the meeting tonight so that we can write a proper summary and get it up onto the website within 2 weeks. We also are going to be using some Zoom polls tonight, so feel free to interact with those on your screen or via the chat box at any time. So before we get started, I want to kind of go over just really quickly the agenda of what we brought you here tonight. As I'm going to introduce the project team, we're going to do a little live poll just to kind of find out where you guys are from and if you guys are users of the B-Line. We're then going to go through a very quick project review and existing conditions, and then go over some potential service concepts, as well as having plenty of time at the end for question and answers. We are going to stop throughout the presentation here tonight to do some, again, live polls and answer some clarifying questions. So again, feel free to use the chat box, which is located on the toolbar at any time during the presentation. So I'm very happy to introduce our project team. I'll have everyone wave as I introduce. So from BCAG, we have John Clark. We have Victoria Proctor. We have Amy White. From LSC, we have Gordon Shaw. You'll hear more from Gordon later. We have Selena McKinney. We have Claire Hutchinson. And from AECOM, we have Andrew Iddickson and Victor Z. And finally, my team here at AIM is two Katies. You have me, Katie DeMeo, and another Katie Owen, who is helping me on the technical side. So as I said, we just want to launch our first poll here. And so on your screen here, I just put up 2 questions. So we want to first hear from you. Do you currently use the B-Line service? Easy yes or no question. If you need any comments, feel free to use the chat box. And then the second question is, where in Butte County do you spend most of your time, whether that's work or home? Maybe it's Biggs, Chico, Gridley, Orville, Paradise, or others that you can put in the chat. Do you guys see the poll? All right, we would love to have would love to have any interaction on the polls. Excellent, James, you're representing the students of Butte, so they come from all over. Fantastic. You're a rare user, but you like to use it more in the future. Fantastic. And again, you can feel free to interact on the poll right on the screen as well. So you can enter in your answer right there. All right. It didn't look like we had any users interact in the poll, but maybe we'll get you later on. But again, if you have any questions about it, feel free to let us know. And then, yes, we will. Can we go back a slide real quick? So we had a user in the chat that wanted to explain. We have BCAG, which is the Butte Council Association of Governments, LSC, AECOM, and AIM are the consulting companies that have came on with BCAG to do this routing study. So someone wanted us to explain who the letters are. Those are just our consulting company that doesn't stand for it. So wonderful. And so with that, I will turn it over to John with BCAG.
Thank you, Katie. Well, who is BCAG? We've got several designations. By the state, we're designated a regional transportation planning agency. By the feds, we're designated a metropolitan planning organization. And then we're also the owner and operator of Butte Regional Transit, or the B Line. So with these designations, the state and federal designations, we're primarily responsible for preparing all the state and federal required transportation plans and programs that are necessary to secure transportation funding that goes for highways, streets and roads, transit, bike, pedestrian, and other transportation modes. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So as the owner operator of the B Line, we wanted to look at our existing fixed route services with this study. And we want to look and see if there are improvements that we can make to our existing B Line routes and schedules. We also wanted to look at our fare policies and fare media, look at any possible new technologies that might help our service, evaluate existing facilities, also look at, what are our strengths and weaknesses for our service. And with public input, we want to look at options to possibly improve our service, to get more people riding the service, enable more access to it. So this meeting tonight, again, is to gain a lot of that public input of our service and hear what the folks out in the community have to say. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So once we kind of complete the study, our goals are to identify a list of recommendations that we could possibly consider to expand mobility. We want to look at and evaluate, all the alternatives and routing options that we could maybe make improvements on. And then we want to develop some solutions that, make the best use of our existing resources to provide as good a service we can to all the cities and the counties here in Butte County. So with that, I will now turn it over to Gordon Shaw.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am the principal in charge of the consulting side of this work, and we'll be doing a good part of the presentation this evening. I first want to spend a few minutes talking about the existing conditions and what we have found in our review of existing services and demographics and so on. I will say that this information is all available on the bcag.org website. There is a document in there, if you just were to Google BCAG routing study, it'll pop right there. And there is a document in there that's, it's 130 pages or so of exciting transit ridership and service analysis. You'll see the kind of detail that we go into to base our analysis on the real data and what's really going on. So to summarize a lot in just a few moments here, one of the things we do is we focus in on the community, because a transit system is only effective if it really matches the needs of the community and the region that it serves. I will take just a moment and say that, yes, this is for the entire countywide system. We will be looking at kind of the main communities as well as intercity, but we are looking at a very broad region of transit service here. So when we look at the need for transit services, we tend to focus on those elements of the community that have the most need for public transit. People that have limited income, seniors, persons with disabilities, people that don't have a car. And in comparison with other parts of California and the country, in particular with regards to seniors and low-income residents and also disability, Butte County has got a relatively high proportion of those types of residents. So there's an important role here. And I will mention, and you can see in the slide there at the bottom, that ridership was down, like everything else impacted by the pandemic. But our conclusion here is there still is a very important role for public transit. It's important for Chico State and for making the campus function and not be overwhelmed with cars and traffic and so on. It's important for Butte College, both campuses of Butte College. Transit ridership did decline prior to the pandemic. You can see the numbers there through 2019. That is very common in mid and even large size transit systems in this country, as cars were getting cheaper to run. Oh, that sounds like such an old statement, that cars were getting cheaper to run. But there was a variety of factors that affected that, and then the pandemic hit. Ridership actually between 2020 and 2021 increased by about 35%. And we were just looking just before this presentation at the September of 21 to September of 22 numbers, and the ridership is up 47% over that year. So to that comment that I saw go by about whether we're seeing an increase because of high gas prices, well, yeah, I think we are seeing some of that. We're also seeing some rebound, particularly in the college ridership with more in-person classes. But I think we have to be realistic and say, if you look at that chart down there, that it's going to be a long time before we see 1.2 million or something. So we are really kind of planning on somewhere maybe 75–80% of our past ridership is where we think we're going to bounce back to. Let me keep going. So the next slide, please. So in terms of looking at Chico, we look at ridership by stop. Some areas of Chico generate low ridership. I'll kind of pick on Route 7 in the kind of northeast side of town as being relatively low ridership. And when we get to the far end of Route 16, way out northwest, we've got low ridership in some areas. But we also have other areas with high ridership between downtown and Chico State and down to the southeast area. And also up north to the North Valley Plaza on the north side. One of the things that we've kind of picked out through the numbers is that there is a lot of people. There's a lot of people who make use of the fact that the buses come together at Chico State near downtown and then out again, but there's also a pattern of people making trips just up in the northern part of Chico. And making connections there. So we're looking at ways of making that stronger. There's some neighborhoods that are not served. You can kind of think your way through where there's donut holes in the route area, and some areas like far to the northwest. So we're looking at how we can better serve those too. Next slide, please. I will go to the southeast here and go to Oroville, where there's essentially two buses that spend the day in Oroville on weekdays, and they alternate between, each one does two routes, and they do local service, as well as Route 20 comes in from Chico and serves kind of the government center north side of town. We're stretched pretty thin in Oroville, trying to go a long ways, like out to the casino, down to the high school and everything. So we look at on-time performance. They're kind of that we have dependability problems. We've got ridership is relatively low in Oroville, and we find that we could be using smaller vehicles in Oroville area. So those are some of the things that we are thinking about in that area. I'll go up on the ridge and say in Paradise and Magalia, our current service is essentially routes 40 and 41 that come up from Chico, and 41 goes on through to Magalia. They try and serve a lot of the community, kind of hooking through town and doing a loop through Paradise, but there's also a lot that we're not serving. So that's kind of our takeaway there. On to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it back over to Katie on what we've been doing in terms of engagement so far.
Yeah, we just wanted to touch really quickly to let you know this isn't the first time that we've been talking to y'all. So we've launched a major survey at the end of last year. We've had almost 300 people take that survey. We had our first community workshop happen in July, and then we have been doing survey awareness and awareness for this workshop over the last couple of weeks. And what we've heard really from this first round of engagement, much like what was just said, is 87% of people think that the service right now is good or excellent. So that's great. Some of the higher ranked factors were driver courtesy and affordability. Some of the lower ranked factors were bus stops and shelters and beeline information at bus stops. And a lot of our participants requested frequent and more weekend service and more shelters at bus stop. And the other thing we want to say is this won't be the last time you'll hear from us. And so we'll be doing some pop-ups. We'll be, again, getting back out and understanding how you guys feel about these service improvements and how they might work and what else might be needed. And so we're excited to continue this conversation. And with that, I will bring it back to Gordon, who will start with our service concepts.
Okay, so to dive into sort of probably the most interesting part of this meeting and why you're spending some of your late afternoon, early evening with us, I'm going to go through some of our current concepts for improvements. I will say that this is not a plan. What you're going to see here is some of the ideas that we as the consulting firm have with regards to Chico and with Oroville and with the Ridge area, as well as the intercity routes. But they are very much open for discussion and comment. And if you see something here you really like, that'd be great. If you see something you don't want to ever see ever again, we're very interested in that too. So with no further ado, let me go off into the next slide. Starting with Chico, one of our key takeaways here is that the services, the overall structure is good. The idea that there is a key hub downtown near Chico State, that we kind of have a route system where the buses come together and they pulse out is kind of what this system is, and it's appropriate for the community. So what you're going to see, I think, is not huge changes. It's more modest changes than that, but we'll get into a lot of sort of things here. We need to address some on-time performance issues. We've got routes that are stretched too long, and the drivers don't have an opportunity to catch their breath and leave the next route run on time. One of the things that we're going to talk about here, and I'll get to this in more detail in just a moment, is microtransit zones, which is a on-demand sort of service in lower ridership areas. So more to come on that. There are areas, as I mentioned, that the fixed route buses are going through and they're not providing much service. They're not getting much ridership. We're looking at more direct service in Southeast Chico and speeding up service between downtown and Southeast Chico and the mall area. And then I mentioned North Valley Plaza as a secondary transit hub. So on to the next slide, please, Katie. On the left in very, very small font, but you probably can get the idea, is the current route system. On the right, you see some of the ideas that we are thinking about, the concepts we are thinking about. And you can see that we have 3 zones there that are microtransit zones. And I have one more slide, and maybe we go to the next slide right now since we're talking about it. So what is microtransit? Well, one of the things that everybody's aware of by now are ride app services. Uber and Lyft are the two big ones. And what microtransit is kind of a public transit version of Uber or Lyft. And you can see on the right there, there's a app that you download on your phone or on your computer. And most people will make a ride request using the app. If they live in that zone, or they can get on the app and say, please to come pick me up. The software, just like in Uber, will figure out where's the closest van to you, how long it's going to take to get there, given that it's got other requests, and it will come and get you typically within at most 30 minutes, which is kind of comparable to the time between buses. It can be faster than that if the van is in your neighborhood. It's using a smaller van, like a Sprinter van sort of thing, typically 8 to 12 passengers. It does have a fare, and it's typically the same as the fixed route. But what it does, if we pop back to the previous slide, is rather than only serving people who are, say, within a 5 or 10 minute walk of these routes, it serves everybody in those zones. And it also will then take you to a key point. So it'll take you, say, to North Valley Plaza, and then you can transfer to the other routes if you want to take a ride across town. It won't take you all the way across town. It's not a taxi, but it'll pick you up anywhere in these broader areas and get you oftentimes to where you want to go. If you just want to go to, the Target that's near you or something. Or it'll take you to a fixed route and you can transfer. So that's one concept there. And I know there's a lot to kind of digest there. Actually, let's stay on that one for a moment, because there's some other options here I want to talk through. Some of the other things, if you look closely between left and right, we've got Route 2 gets more streamlined. It doesn't go to DMV Plaza, is kind of a key factor here. You can see Route 17, we're looking at spreading that a bit more so that it can serve Fair Avenue and the Jesus Center in that area down there. I think those are kind of the key thing. I think actually a key thing here is that Route 7 is no longer on the map. It gets replaced essentially by microtransit. And the same thing is the case on Route 16 that goes off to the north. One of the things that we find is that, like on the Esplanade, there's a lot of double coverage there to the left. So let's not run 2 buses down there, and let's take those resources and instead using them for these microtransit services. So lots to digest there, but that's the kind of key concept. Now we can go to the next slide. Or actually that one, yes. So I think I've hit most of these. We've kind of got more two-way service, the less one-way loop service. We've shortened some of the problem routes and reduced the overlap between routes. So that is our concepts that we're sort of working towards in the short term with Chico today. I've got another slide here that's kind of a work in progress. I'll tell you that this overall adds modestly to the cost of service by adding one more vehicle. We took away 2 fixed routes. We added 3 zones of microtransit. So it does cost us a little something more, but we think we're going to get some more ridership out of that service. The other thing that we're looking at right now, that's a whole kind of dimension to the service, is the hours of service. I'm very interested in people's thoughts on that. And we've heard a lot about things like, should we have more evening service? Should we have more service on weekends? Particularly in the evening on routes 8 and 9, which are more focused on the college campus. So those are some things that we're still evaluating. One more slide here, and then I think we're back to some polling and discussion. We're putting our thoughts into kind of a near-term plan, which would be in the next year or 2, and then some more that are maybe a bit more of a reach, bit more maybe 5 to 7 years out. This mid-range of looking at adding more service so that we can get to more 15-minute peak service on routes 2 and 14 in particular. And we're getting close to the point there where in other areas, you can stop worrying so much about the schedule and just kind of get to the stop, and you know that before too very long, a bus will come by. So there's some real benefits there. In the midterm, we would be monitoring these microtransit zones. If we have new development, new needs, we can adjust those. I mentioned the ideas about expanding service on Saturdays, and maybe even potentially adding some Sunday service, whether it's in town or going up the ridge, those sort of things. And also Route 20 as it heads out of town, maybe some expansion there too. So with that, I think we're back to a live poll here, and Katie, you can take it away.
Absolutely. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to stop after each one of these areas and do some polling and answer any clarifying questions. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and we want to know, do you like the concept of replacing fixed route service with microtransit in the areas? I don't know why I say the 3 areas, in these areas. And again, you can answer yes, you can answer no, or you can put in the chat box your answer. So you can answer yes or no in the chat box, and you can put any comments and concerns in the chat box as well. Can someone just answer the poll so I know it's working?
Yeah.
Because I just don't see anyone answering it.
No.
I see people answering the polls.
I do also. It's on there.
Oh, well, great. I'm not seeing it on my end, but it'll be recorded in Zoom. I'll be able to get it. All right. I'm glad to see people are answering it. If I end the poll, see if I share results, it says this is what I see on my end. So you can see where I'm a little bit confused. No worries. So we're going to ask the second question, which is, do you like the other changes to the fixed routes that are being presented? You can answer yes, you can answer no.
Or chat.
Katie, I think there's a pop-up window that maybe you can't see, and that's where all the results are.
Yeah, again,
Yeah.
I should see it on this. I think it's just a technical issue on my end right now. I've never seen this before, where I've launched it and it's going and you're seeing it on your end. But again, we'll be able to see it, and we'll be able to include all of it into the meeting summary. And it looks like right now we have 71% saying yes and about 25% saying no. So that's great. Thanks, Katie.
That was on the first question. On the second question, it's 100% yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Nope. Yeah,
Oh.
two chat boxes.
And 2 chat boxes. Great. LaDonna says lumping all the changes together is not effective. I do not agree. And I think they need more time to evaluate. Fair.
I like that response.
Absolutely.
And I think there is a David who also said the same thing. And that certainly is a valid response, that this is a lot to take in. And please take your time thinking about it. And we'll have some contact information for you to provide comments when you've got a chance to mull it over.
And absolutely, we're going to put the full presentation in with the meeting summary up onto the website as well. So you'll be able to read and digest it from there as well. James put a comment that he would like to see the concepts expanded beyond these plans. The quick response is essential to growing ridership. Yep, Joshua agrees as there's a little bit more studying, lots of information presented. And Michelle says we need to add more routes on Sundays. Great. That's exactly the types of comments that we're looking for here tonight. All right, so let's move on to the next section. I'll bring it back to Gordon.
Okay. All right, moving down southeastward in Oroville area. Actually, let's go to the next slide first, just so that we can get oriented here a bit. And we've got the existing service on the left, and service to our concepts to the right. And in looking at the ridership on some of these legs of the routes, some of them are very low, like a few people a day in Thermalito that are using the fixed route that is going through their community 11 times a day. And so on the right, you can see the general idea that there are parts of Oroville that need fixed route and that have enough ridership that the fixed route is making sense. There are other areas where, in particular on the right, the microtransit zone would be taking one of those buses and instead put the driver in a van and say, here is your service area. So we would still, most of the time, be running 2 different vehicles in Oroville. They'd be transferring at the transit center. The Thermalito area is something that we also have vans down there that are doing paratransit services. And they also would have time to serve a second zone because there's not much demand in that area. And then Route 20 would be realigned a bit to be more consistent, and perhaps would go to hourly service, which is kind of more on the intercity side. But this overall would be providing more consistent service where we need it, and broader areas where we don't need the fixed route service. So that's our, and let's go back to the slide before. So this is kind of a summary of what I just mentioned. We would still be with 2 vehicles as well as a Thermalito zone. And something else that we're also looking at, and this is more in the being consistent or being cost effective. Almost no ridership after 6:30, just a few passengers. And we're running these 2 buses for about another hour. So looking at perhaps saving some money by doing that. So that's a kind of a quick summary on Oroville, and I'm going to turn it back to Katie for our next round of polling. Oh, yeah.
All right, now I'm back with more polls. So we're going to ask again, do you like, let me launch this one. Do you like the concept of replacing fixed route service with microtransit? And if someone from the project team wants to tell me how the results are doing, that would be helpful.
We are at 75%, 6 out of 8 saying yes, and 2 out of 8 saying no, and haven't seen anything in the chat box.
All right. And LaDonna did put a chat that paratransit needs an app like the microzones. Calling the phone to book the appointment is very time consuming.
Yes, that's true. I should have mentioned when it comes to microtransit, there's always the option of calling. There's always the concern with people who may not be all that used to using smartphones that, wait a minute, maybe I don't get service at all and it's inequitable. That, by the way, is what we have found in other areas, that there's a lot of seniors that have figured it out pretty quickly. But if they can't, or if they don't want to, they can always call the dispatcher at Beeline and get their trip that way.
Absolutely. All right. And so for the second question for Oroville, let me launch it here. And again, do you like the other changes to the fixed routes that's being presented here? And again, much like last time, we know that you'll need a little bit more time to kind of let it sink in, but we just want to know your initial reactions. And again, feel free to put any comments or concerns in the chat box. We want this to be a conversation. And as Gordon mentioned at the beginning, these are not set in stone. This is the time we really want to hear from you. All right, do we have some results?
7 out of 7. I think we're on the right path here. Yep.
All right, it's like a surprise for me now with the results. Excellent. And next we're gonna throw it right back to Gordon for our next.
All right, one more set of slides from me. Now we're going up the ridge and talking about Paradise Magalia. And our service concepts here are the quick summary is consolidating routes 40 and 41. We're almost halfway there right now. If you look, say, in the schedules and on the website, with COVID and with the campfire impacts, they're basically being scheduled together. As a reminder, 41 goes way up the ridge, and Route 40 just gets up into Paradise and then loops around. We have the concept of providing, right now it's 8 runs a day, and there's some long gaps in mid-morning, mid-afternoon, like 2-hour gaps. It would be great to get to hourly consistent service so that you know that the bus to Paradise always leaves at the bottom of the hour or something like that. We're also looking at microtransit to serve the outlying areas in Magalia and North and East Paradise. I'll show a map in a minute. And then in looking at where best to put our resources, back before Campfire, there was a Route 31 between Paradise and Oroville. And it didn't even then have great ridership. And there's a lot more need to come down the Skyway to Paradise than going south off the ridge. So our concept is to not reinstate that. But let's go to the next map and you can kind of see the details here. Again, the map on the left is the existing route. And the bus goes up as far as Wagstaff and turns around and comes back down on Clark, back to kind of the downtown area. For those of you who haven't been keeping up on your BCAG news, there is a grant and a whole process for building a transit center kind of down there where you can see on the right where the loop comes back around. And that's part of the plan here. But our concept here really has to do with using microtransit to expand the service to some of these areas that are now redeveloping. And the yellow pins on the right, those are the current list of in progress multifamily and mobile home courts that are being redeveloped for more housing in Paradise, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. But you can see if we put those pins on the map on the left, we wouldn't be serving them. So the idea of a microtransit van service that will pick you up at any of those pins in the blue area. If you're at a pin along the green line, well, you can use the 6 route bus, but it'll take you to the transit center, or maybe it'll take you to a connection at the north end there, and then we'll take you down the hill, or we'll take you around Paradise. So it is it's a bit more. It is some increase in service to do this, but we really think that it's the sort of thing that we need if we're going to have a transit service that supports the efforts of the community to rebuild. To the question in the chat there, probably the same kind of service, lots of different scenarios here. The default case is that the hours that the fixed route runs now, 7 in the morning till 7 at night, that would probably be our potential span of service. But as we look at expanding other hours of service, we could be looking at other hours of service there too. So as I've mentioned, this would be more convenient. It expands the service area. It uses our transit center for transfers. Right now, there's times where if you want to get down the hill, it's a 2-hour wait for the next bus, but this could be expanding the hours of service. And that's kind of our concepts there on the near-term plan. In the long term, we could look at expansion of service into the evenings, perhaps till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Some more runs on Saturdays, maybe earlier in the morning. And right now, Route 20 is the only service on Sunday. Maybe this new revised Route 40 could be another one. So, and as new areas develop and new residents move in, we've got the flexibility on microtransit to serve them. I'm almost done here. We also have some other intercity routes. Route 20 that connects connects Chico with Oroville. The idea of we're close to hourly service, we're not quite there. And it sure is convenient since so many of our routes on both ends are hourly, that we can tie this together with an hourly connection. I will also say that Route 20 didn't take as much of a reduction in ridership during COVID as the other routes, so it's held up a little bit better. We're also looking at, should we have just 1 or 2 more later runs on weekdays, so that we can get people home that have a little bit later hours of work, say. We also have Route 30 that goes from Biggs and Gridley over to Oroville. That's where we see most people in Biggs and Gridley want to go, is into Oroville for shopping or for medical or whatever. Then they can make transfers there. But there is, so one of the things that we're looking at is in the midterm to have additional runs there to expand that service. And then there's also Route 32, which is essentially just a commuter route, but it goes through Durham. And so it serves a corridor that otherwise wouldn't be served. And the idea is to keep that the way it is. So with all of that, let's go back to Katie, and we've got some more polling.
All right, so Gordon, thank you so much for that presentation. That was fantastic. So this is the last of our polling, which is going to lead into our live question and answer session. So feel free from here, put any questions that you have in the chat box. You'll also be able to raise your hand if you do want to engage with our project team. We have plenty of time here to answer any questions that we might have. But first, let's get started on some polls. And so the first, now it's not even letting me launch it. What is happening? Has someone else started a poll? I'm going to read the poll out loud. I have no idea what's happening on my end. So do you like the concept of replacing fixed route service in Magalia and North Paradise with microtransit or expanded area? Oh, now I launched it. Here it is. I'm going to be talking to Zoom after this. And again, if someone from the project team wants to share.
Right now we have 5 responses, 4 saying yes.
Wonderful. All right, so the second question that we have here is, do you like the idea of a more consistent weekday hourly service to Chico? So again, we're talking about weekday hourly service to Chico.
10 out of 10, 11 out of 11 think it's a good idea.
All right, we like to hear that. Okay. And then the last poll that we have is, we really want you to pick, we know that a couple of these might be your preference, but we just want to hear about your top preference. So we want to know your top preference for the following improvements for the fixed route Paradise Chico service. Is it more runs during weekdays? Is it later service on weekday evenings? Is it more Saturday service? Or is it Sunday service? And if you have others, feel free to put it in the chat. But we would love to hear from you about what your top preference might be. Do we have some preferences?
This is more of a horse race. We've got 3 out of 7. 3 out of 7 for weekdays, and now we're up to 4 out of 9 for weekdays and 5 out of 9 for Saturday service.
Wonderful. James is not sure how the microtransit will work for Magalia students needing to connect with the 40 to 41.
I can answer that. So if we do our job right and we start the microtransit service, say a half hour before the first fixed route bus gets up the hill, they would get on an app, they would ask for a ride on microtransit, it would get them down to the transit center, the bus would come by and take them down the hill and make a transfer.
Gordon, do you know if we had a question James asked before that about some of the Butte students, if they need to get to campus by 8, do you think that with using the microtransit service, they would still be able to get there on time?
We would have to look into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great question though. And then Michelle's from the Bay Area and they need more bus service overall. Understand that. We're going to go to the next slide. And again, this opens it up to our question and answer session. So again, we have plenty of time. We have about a half hour here if we need it to go over any questions and answers. So if you want to raise your hand and engage with the project team, if you have any questions, if you want us to go back to any slide and talk about any of these new service concepts, we're more than happy to do it. Again, this is the time that we would love to hear from you. And we're here to talk. So I'm going to leave it open for a second. Don't everyone speak at once. Oh, Michelle has her hand raised. All right, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Hi, Michelle.
Hello. I'm from the Bay Area and used to service 24/7 on certain days. And the fact that there's only 2 routes that run on Sunday makes it difficult. I can't go anyplace. I don't live close to the transit center. And I'd like to be able to go places on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a valid concern, a valid question. And definitely something we'll have to take into consideration as we make these new service improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Oh, yeah. I've been using buses for like 15 years, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a vital service. And again, talking to people like you is where we need to understand, again, where we need to be and if these concepts will work. Jean wants to know if we're considering free fares for seniors. Have we looked into fares or?
We have not looked into fares, no.
Okay.
That is a upcoming part of the study, is to review fares. I will say that there are more and more systems around the country that are looking at particular groups, whether it's students or seniors or veterans, and coming up with fare programs to support them.
Absolutely. So James just brought up a great connection point. So Butte College has stopped their bus service to Paradise. So the Paradise students really rely on the service to get them to Chico, where they can connect with one of our buses to get them to the main campus. They really want to collaborate and make sure that our connections match up. And so James, if you wouldn't mind, I think I do have your contact information, but if you want to message it to me, I'll make sure that we get it to the project team so that we can collaborate. That's a great idea. James wants to know what percentage of operating costs currently come from fares.
I would have to look that up. Unless
Less than we should.
Probably about 15 to 20%.
I believe it's about 15, yes.
Yeah.
Great. And so again, like Michelle had said, we want to know what you're using the service for, where you need it to go. It looks like, all right, Kimberly, great question. So Kimberly asks, is there a planned conversion for switching to a cleaner fuel or energy sources? Is there also efforts that the cities or towns can do to help improve the accessibility for residents and improving the overall transit routes? I will say the one thing that what you're doing is attending tonight. That's definitely helpful.
Regarding the question about converting to a cleaner fleet, we've just submitted our electric bus rollout plan to the California Air Resources Board. So we have some timeline requirements where we have to start purchasing electric buses. We're in the process of doing that right now to get our first electric buses, but by 2040, our entire fleet has to be converted to, we're going electric. There's also hydrogen, but right now we're just focused on going to electric. So.
And again, what cities and towns can do to help with improving accessibility is again, coming to meetings like this tonight, letting us know where you need the service, where people need the service, where your residents or your users are using it, encouraging them to be a part of this process, to stay engaged with us, to show up when we start doing our pop-ups. Again, unless we hear from people directly, we can't guess. So we want to know. And so again, starting here tonight, or really starting with our survey that launched at the end of 2021 is when it started, but we want to hear from everybody. All right. Kimberly asks, will the electric buses be powered by renewable energy sources as those are becoming more available?
Possibly down the road. I mean, our entire facility has solar power, but once we start, using electric buses, we'll be using more than we're generating with our solar panels. We might look at expanding that, but we'll be having to pull power off the PG&E grid to get our fleet going and running. So,
Great. And again, these are great questions. But again, if you have any comments about the service proposals or the service concepts, excuse me. But again, we're excited to get back to work and get these into improvements and come back and talk to you all about it as well. I'm going to leave this open for the next about 2 or 3 minutes in case we have any extra questions. But again, you're also going to get some contact information here at the end. So you'll be able to have, of course, thanks, Michelle, for joining us. You'll get the contact information for the team. So you'll be able, so if you think later tonight about a question, feel free to let us know. And then, like I said, we're going to be putting this recording as well as the meeting summary and presentation onto the website. So if there's anyone that you know who has missed the meeting tonight, who really relies on service, who wants to, again, let their thoughts be known, feel free to share this meeting summary with them or the video with them. Again, the more people who have eyes on it, the more people will understand the changes that we're trying to make. All right, let's go over to the schedule, and I'll throw it over to John to kind of talk about what the next steps are. Oh, now you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
So, following the schedule, we're in the fall of 22, obviously. So we'll be continuing to work with the consultants to take this public input we've received tonight. I think, as Gordon said, we still have some analysis to do regarding some of the recommendations on microtransit. Some of the other changes to the routes. We need to look at our funding for any recommendations that will require additional resources over what we have going right now. But hopefully, Gordon, when do you think we would have more information about our recommendations and costs and stuff to present? And I would assume we would do that at our next public meeting workshop.
We're developing a second tech memo that looks at all these alternatives and costs them out and looks at the ridership impacts and kind of the operational impacts. And that's an early December due date on that.
Yeah. And then we'll be working with AIM as well on a marketing plan. But probably when the study's complete, we whatever recommendations and changes we would want to be making with the system again after we've vetted them with the public and gotten your support, it's probably going to be late 23, if not early 24, before we would implement any of the proposed new changes to our fixed route system.
Great. And I think we'll go to the next slide, which again, I've put the website in the chat box. I'll also put John's email in the chat box. But again, this is kind of midpoint, not even midpoint of this community engagement. So again, it started at the end of last year. It's going to continue on, as John says. We would really love to hear from you. We would love for you to stay involved. Again, we really, really appreciate you all joining here tonight. We appreciate everyone, all the almost 400 people who are almost 300 people have taken the survey so far. Again, every voice matters and kind of helps us as we move this process forward. So again, with that, that's the close of our presentation today. The project team will stay online here in case there's any other questions. But with that, I just really want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and being a part of this process. Really, really appreciate your time.